The Accidental Entrepreneur is brought to you with the help of our sponsor, AWeber, the world's leading small business email marketing and automation service provider. Since 1998, AWeber has helped more than 1 million small businesses and entrepreneurs through its suite of web-based email marketing, automation tools, and education. AWeber, the best option when it comes to marketing your business. The podcast is also brought to you by the Alternative Board. Since 1989, the Alternative Board, or TAB, has been one of the leading peer advisory and business coaching organizations for independent business owners and CEOs across the world. By facilitating peer advisory boards, private one-on-one coaching, and strategic planning services, TAB helps business owners improve their businesses in ways that change their lives. And be sure to connect with our affiliate sponsor, GSM Growth Agency. They're boosting e-commerce businesses to 6 and 7 figures in revenue and cover everything from ads and social media influencers to making your website better. GSM Growth Agency focuses on taking businesses from startup success to bigger success, going above and beyond to make sure growth sticks around. They're all about cool ideas, lasting partnerships, and making your mark in the e-commerce world. And be sure to support the podcast by ordering some logo merchandise from our online store. Listen to all of our sponsors' commercials later in this episode and follow their links in the show notes to learn more about their products and services. All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the podcast. I'm Mitch Beinhacker, your host. Got another great guest today. John's going to be talking to us about social entrepreneurship and the things that he does for the community and through his organization. We're talking about some things that are unique to his business. So if you are listening on your favorite audio directory, leave us a 5-star review whenever you can. If you are watching us on YouTube, subscribe to the channel, like us, so we can keep connecting with guys like John. I have been criticized by some of my colleagues that I don't mention what I do. Everybody's like, well, what do you do for a living? So just to remind people out there, the podcast, one of the sponsors is my law firm, Beinhacker Law. I'm a small business attorney in the New York, New Jersey area. So I do small business work, estates, trust, probate, and real estate for the most part. So let's get on with today's show.
The information provided in these episodes is for entertainment purposes only. It is not a guarantee of success or to be construed as advice of any kind. You should always seek advice from local licensed professionals before making any decisions.
The dictionary defines an entrepreneur as a person who organizes and manages any enterprise, especially a business, usually with considerable initiative and risk. People often start a business without much choice, perhaps due to a job loss or just being dissatisfied at work, and they come up with an idea they just know can be successful. They become entrepreneurs by accident. That is to say, their success or failure happens by accident, not with intention. My name is Mitch Beinhacker. I'm a corporate attorney and a business advisor. You're listening to The Accidental Entrepreneur, my podcast about how to achieve success on purpose, not by accident. Join me along with our monthly guests, where we share our knowledge and help you get a hold of your business. And now on to today's episode. All right, John, you can hear me, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Welcome to the show. I know we talked a while back. Glad to finally have you on. So we're going to talk about your business, your life, your passion project, all the things that you're doing for all these guys coming out of prison, I guess, right? Good Samaritan Home, right? It's not Good Samaritan House.
Right.
I'm sure that was intentional, right? Yeah. Okay, good. So before we get into that, though, and all that you're doing, let's go back, because I know you've had a path to get to where you are, and tell me about your history and the things you've done over the years and trials and tribulations, all that kind of stuff.
Well, it may be hard for some of our younger listeners, but I'm a product of the 60s. And the 60s was a time of great confusion.
Right.
1968, in fact, was the time we thought the country was literally coming apart.
Right.
So a lot of us grew up with actually, it's very similar to what we're going through today. This feeling of angst and confusion, and there's a great deal of anger that's floating around.
Of course.
And it's very hard to say, now I'd like to settle down and get a house and have a family and be normal, because normal no longer applies.
Yeah, normal's a word in quotes. And John, I think a lot of the young people just think this is happening for the first time. All the, the unrest in our country and it's just terrible. But yeah, 60s were the big time. We thought it would never happen again, right? And here it is.
Well, the irony is that I see this happen in 1926.
Yeah, it just goes in cycles. Absolutely.
It's cyclical. That's
Yeah.
why I'm surprised and not surprised. But
Right.
what happened though is that many of us came up not knowing what we wanted to do with life, and we ended up drifting. So I went through a series of careers after college. I
Mhm.
had a degree in psychology, which meant absolutely nothing
Right.
because,
Right.
yeah, I was qualified to pontificate at parties, but that's about it.
Right.
And so I struggled from one. I was a children's home counselor. I was a truck driver. I was a fireman. I was a building contractor. I was a journalist. I
Did
even
everything.
tried my hand at being a minister until I
Okay.
realized that I just wasn't that good at it. So
That's funny.
I had more questions than I had answers.
Right.
Well, at 53, when most people are retiring, and I had 3 children and a wife, and we were just struggling, moving around. And I stumbled across this idea of using our home to help people who were struggling like me, homeless
Okay.
people. So we
Okay.
opened up our home and literally used a bedroom as a shelter. And one thing led to another. And the Department of Corrections said, can you help people who are low risk offenders who need housing? If they can get housing, then they can get a job and then they can be safe or out of prison.
Right. Now, how in the world did you convince your wife to allow you to bring a homeless person in your house? You have 3 children, right?
Yeah. Well,
Plus
let's put it this way.
kids,
When I met my wife, I was
Right.
living in my truck and I was homeless, and
Got
she
it.
was working 2 jobs and had a house. And so I was immediately attracted to her stability.
Got it.
And so she was with me for 30 plus years by then. And to be quite candid, she's my best friend. And we have the same passion. It's a faith based work,
Yeah.
but it's not
Has to
faith
be.
required.
Right.
Our faith motivates us, and we
Sure.
share that faith. And we try to simply live our faith through acts of mercy in some way.
Understandable.
And so, yeah, but that's glossing it over. It was hard.
Yeah.
And so what we did eventually was we bought a second house across the street that my construction background allowed me to remodel.
Uh-huh.
And so we
So
were
you
able to
did a lot
get
of it
people
yourself.
out of our own home and across the street.
How did the Department of Corrections hear about what you were doing?
I was doing some volunteer work at the prison, just trying to connect there, and through the chaplain, and they said, "You have a shelter. Would you be interested in doing this? And we'll do a per diem to help offset your expenses." Because for 5 years I had no income at all.
Yeah, I was going to say, you can't buy a house across the street and put people in there with they weren't paying for it, right? They're homeless. So
They're homeless.
at that point, you had no revenue, right? But then you discovered, there are government monies available and prison monies because it saves them money, right?
Well, it costs, give or take, $89 a day to house somebody in prison. And so the studies have shown that if you put somebody in the community who's low risk, they get a job, then they're paying taxes and not being a tax burden.
Right.
So,
now, low risk, John, is the level of offense. Is that what's considered low risk, or is that a psychological evaluation? What's low risk mean?
there's a Ohio risk assessment score, and that's based on a lot of factors. For example, if you have a history of juvenile crime up through adult crime, that would raise your score.
Right.
If you have a repeat pattern, that would raise your score. It's not so much what you've done, but the numbers of issues to show what we call criminogenic thinking.
Right, a pattern of chronic.
Yeah, I'm not offended by somebody who has committed a serious violent crime. I am offended by someone who doesn't give a damn, and they simply are trying to cut corners.
Sure.
And often the young ones are the hardest ones to deal with.
God, yeah, sure.
Those who have been in the county jail think they're still smarter than you and I.
Yeah.
But those who have been to prison for 20 years, they've seen Shawshank. They know what it's about.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's breaks your will after a while, I'm sure. And also mellows you out, if that's the right word. But when you're young, you think, nothing can stop you. You can do whatever you want. So what happened with the house? You were able to get funding to purchase the house?
Well, that was the interesting story. My wife's parents died, and they left her a few $1,000s. So I said to her, "You can put the money in the bank, and you can keep it. It's your money, or we could look to invest it and use something to do something we say we believe in."
Right.
And it's up to you. And I think she called me several names for a while, but she finally came to agree, and we bought this house I think at the time it maybe cost $60,000, and I had to put 2 years worth of labor in it. But out of that,
Before you could use the property was in.
that's exactly right. So I crawled through every nook and cranny in that building for 2 years trying to remodel it because we didn't have the cash, but I
Right.
had the skills.
Right. But you had to
And
work
so
also at the same time, right? So you can only do it in your spare time.
then we were able to bring in one or two or three people
Yeah.
in this house, and they paid us a per diem. So we were able to meet our bills that way.
Got it. Now, you lived in a suburban neighborhood, right? Where were you living at the time?
Well, we're in Ohio here, and
Okay.
this is northwest of Dayton in a rural white community. That's a factor because small towns tend to be conservative.
Yeah.
White towns tend to be conservative regarding racial issues.
Yeah.
And so when we first opened our house to a man coming from prison, he was coming from Cleveland.
Okay.
And that made people nervous because the thinking is a black man coming from Cleveland is far more dangerous
Right. There's
than
a
a
lot of
white
prejudice.
man locally.
Sure.
And the truth was, he was more afraid of the white people than the white people
I'm
were
sure.
of him.
Right.
And ironically, that was 23 years ago. He called me just a few months ago and said, just want to say hello and say thank you. And I'm still working as a truck driver. And he said, I happened to read your book. And so he
Okay.
went on and on about that. So it made me feel like when the first case makes it makes you feel
Yeah.
even better.
Accomplished. Yeah. So, I mean, we could talk about, how you figure out the business side of it, but there's not a lot of, the issues are more like, dealing with things like, how did the community accept the fact that forget about who's going to be in there. Probably before that, I'm sure you have to go in front of like a local planning board, right? And you have to submit plans and say, this is our use. We're going to use it for this. And we have connections to the prison, whatever. There had to be people that were like with pitchforks that said, no way.
The answer is yes and no.
Yeah, okay.
It's not a group home, and it's
Right.
not an institutionalized type of home. It was simply our home. It would
Okay.
be similar to, say, we're a bed and breakfast. And,
Okay.
and so we were just sharing our home and within the existing zoning laws. However, the local newspaper called and said, we heard you're doing this. We'd like to do a story. And I thought that would be good. It would generate positive community support.
Did it?
Well, it generated the pitchforks you're talking about.
Right. Of
There were
course.
petitions, there were letters to the editor, there were council meetings, there were more council meetings, there were laws passed.
Yeah, right.
It got tough.
Yeah,
really
because you
tough.
were within the zoning laws, so there really wasn't anything they could do at that point unless they, like you said, passed an ordinance to. But a lot of that's arbitrary and capriciousness. Towns can't just do that.
Yeah, I think the term that my attorney used was tortious interference.
Yeah, absolutely. Tortious
Yeah,
interference.
and
with
so we ended
economic
up suing the
opportunity.
city.
Yeah, to get them back off.
And that was a long, protracted process.
Yeah.
And of course, in this ironically, the state doesn't want to get involved in local politics, so it made it even more difficult because we felt this was a legitimate, not just faith-based but community-based issue that
Right.
would benefit the community and save taxpayer money. But what I ended up doing finally, I tried to convince people with the data, but they don't hear data.
No.
What they heard was in the winter when I had a snowblower and I went around and I made sure that everybody's sidewalk was cleaned in my
I'm
entire
sure.
neighborhood.
Yeah.
And so you diffuse the criticism by being a good neighbor, basically.
Yeah, of course. Now, were you able to operate during this time, or while you're in court suing the town trying to get approvals, there's no CO, you can't put anybody in the building?
There was an attempt, but my attorney fortunately was working pro bono, and at the time that made all the difference because, like I say, I wasn't making any salary at all.
Right, of course.
And but out of that, today we are the primary housing agent for the local court, and so we calculate that we have saved over the years $1 million in local tax money in housing people in lieu of jail.
Wow.
And now the police will call us and say,
Right,
we
I'm
have
sure.
a guy, can you take him?
Yeah, yeah. So do you just have this one home, or is there more than one property now?
Well, we had one house, then another in Greenville is the name of the town.
Okay.
But then they said, Dayton is a much larger town, 30 miles away. Can you do something there? So in an act of faith is really what it was. bought 2 more houses in Dayton and hired staff.
Yeah.
And now we have in 3 counties, we have 19 houses.
Oh, wow.
On any given day, we house 90 men and women in these 19 houses.
Oh, yeah, so it's more than a labor of love now. It is a entrepreneurial venture. You have staff, you have, I'm sure, food to manage, you got bills to manage, you got taxes, you got towns to deal with. I'm sure you got complaints sometimes, right? You want to make the neighbors appeased. They're all in residential communities, all these homes?
They're
Well,
all
not
in
in Dayton,
residential
you said
community. The
Dayton.
idea is to reincorporate, to
Right.
be part of the community. So yes, there are often neighbor issues, but most of our homes are in areas that need help anyway.
Got it, a little bit downtrodden
Yeah, and so we actually are an improvement to the neighborhood.
because you're fixing up the property and whatever. So what's your business structure? Do you have a manager at each property and then they report to you? And how do you manage? 'Cause that's a lot, right? 19 houses in 3 counties. You can't do them yourself.
It's very difficult. It's
Yeah.
a constant battle. The fortunate thing, we don't have to have a live-in manager, but we
Okay.
have to do house checks because it's called independent housing.
Right.
It's not a lockdown facility.
Right.
So let's suppose we have a guy who's on probation and he wants to leave. Well, he's
Yeah.
allowed to leave, but if he has to just notify his parole officer.
Because
So we are not
somewhere
a
else.
legal entity. We
Right.
are a housing support entity.
Right. But as long as he notifies, because if he doesn't, then that could be a violation of his parole and then he get in trouble.
That's exactly. So in a sense, we're the good guys and let the parole officer be the heavy.
Got it. And then what do? You have like one person that manages a couple of properties because they go and visit them and keep an eye on. They don't have to live there, you said, right?
They don't live there, but they're in the vicinity. So we have
Yeah.
3 house checks a day where we go by and touch base. But this is where I think makes it unique is that we don't
Mhm.
just check heads. We get involved. And my managers know everybody's history. They know who they are. They know their goals. And they get involved with them. And it's a mentoring relationship, which
Yeah.
I think is what's the critical element.
Oh yeah, sure. To help them get jobs and back in the community. And is the goal to eventually move them out? Like you got people coming in, right? So you must have inflow, outflow. Is the goal to, reincorporate them into society to get them out of the house so they have a job and are independent?
We are temporary. And the one program is 90 days, but often people
okay.
stay longer depending
Right.
on need. So they could be with us for, on average, probably up to a year.
Oh, okay. Could be that
And
long.
the other program is what we call higher risk program. And these are people who have failed many times. So they may stay 2 years.
Got it.
And
Failed, you mean repeat offenders or having trouble in the community?
they failed in programming.
Got it. Got
So
it. Got it.
and often what we're dealing with in the higher risk program is mental health issues.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah.
The mental health is probably the biggest issue right next to addiction issues.
Yeah, I'm sure. 'Cause, yeah, I can't even imagine. Now, you don't provide mental health services. Does the county or the government provide those kind of services?
That would be, we're simply a partner. We provide the housing. The sad part is that we're the only housing provider in the entire southwest corner of the state. They're literally, they're it.
Right.
That's it. Now,
So
there
if
are
you're
other,
full, you got no choice.
at
right?
least officially, we're it.
Right.
There may be nonprofits that are out there doing their own, but we are overseen by the state and we're held accountable to their standards. That's
So
much more strict.
So out of 19 houses, how many beds do you have then?
Well, some of those houses are what we call transitional or long term, where we actually keep somebody for 2 or 3 or 4 years, and they pay their own boarding house rent. So I would say we have on the average of 30, 60, maybe 120 beds.
And are you full all the time with waiting lists and people come in and out all the time?
We're looking at another couple buildings next week because we're at
You need to grow.
capacity.
Yeah.
It just keeps growing. The best advice I ever got was there's always work in rehabilitation.
I mean, there's no shortage of people that are messing up their lives and making bad decisions or have mental health issues or whatever. That's certainly not going away, unfortunately.
Well, and the important thing is that if somebody's in the community in some sort of house like ours, they can get a job, they can pay their child support, They can buy in the community, and they can at least have a chance to redo their lives. But if they're in jail or in prison, then everything stops.
Right.
And
Till they
you and
come
I
out.
are paying for that, and nobody wins.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, it's interesting because as a social enterprise, right, your goal is to like go out of business, right? If nobody had any more problems and there weren't people coming out of prison like this and they didn't need your services, you will have done your job, right? So that's kind of, and it's not going to happen, obviously, because we have a society with people that get in trouble for all kinds of reasons, good, bad, or indifferent. So, but I'm curious. So each facility has like a kitchen facility and things like that, right? Where they feed them meals, or do they have to just use the kitchen? Like, how do they live in these buildings?
We provide a furnished facility with all the kitchen utensils that are needed. We don't provide the food directly,
No,
because food stamps will do that, and the local pantries and such. So we are invested in the community.
yeah,
And you'd be amazed how many community food banks are, local churches in particular. So it involves the community. So it's not just us as an outsider. We're part of the solution with others.
but if someone's living there, if they're a resident, they got to cook their own food and get their own food.
Get the independent housing. In other words, it's not a home where you're simply given all the amenities and you sit there like you did in prison.
Yeah, there's not a kitchen staff that's making food and putting it out on a line that you.
That's right, because the alternatives, if you want to leave here, then you'd be on your own.
Right, you want to get them ready to live on their own, right?
That's exactly right.
Yeah. Now, what about cleaning the facility? If I'm living there, is it my responsibility to clean my room and share in the bathroom?
That's actually a big issue. We have an old Navy SEAL philosophy of a made bed is a made day is a made life. So
I agree with that. I always feel like day's going in the right direction when I make my bed and my house is all neat.
Absolutely.
You know?
Let's suppose that you're applying for a job and they look at the box that says I have committed a felony. So you're going to get rejected 1, 2, 3 times, 10 times a day. So at the end of the day, you come back and your bed is made, your room is clean. You say, at least I can look at that and know I did something right.
Yeah. No, there's a lot to say about that psychologically, right?
Yeah.
Feeling like you have some control over a life that a lot probably you can't control.
And also it shows respect for your housemate. It shows respect for the program. It shows respect for yourself.
Yeah, absolutely.
In fact, I'll tell you one example. The county has a program called Reentry, and they train people for job searching, and they often help them and refer them. And they have a graduation. Yesterday was a graduation, and 7 of our residents went through this 8-week class, and they were fitted with a new suit for the graduation ceremony. And you would not believe how proud they were to be wearing a suit.
Yeah.
And
makes you feel like a human being, like a person.
Yeah, they were just smiling from ear to ear. And in fact, it's going to be part of my newsletter in December because it's the best news we've had in a long time.
Okay, so that brings up an interesting point. So you have a newsletter, right, to send to prospective supporters and supporters, I'm sure. So where do those people fit in? You're not sending newsletters to your residents, are you?
No,
of course not.
Yeah, we don't solicit in the prisons either.
Right, of course. You don't have to.
Actually, we only have maybe 300 or 400 people that have in the community who have been supporting. And I'm not looking for financial support because that's just a drop in a bucket. What I'm looking for is emotional or psychological support. I want to share what we do so others will share in not the work, but in the benefit. My doctoral research was in mentorship.
Mm-hmm.
And what it showed was that if you get involved in helping somebody reenter, it not only helps them, but it helps you, and you grow psychologically, emotionally, or spiritually by your work. So the community wins. That's the purpose of the newsletter.
So you're marketing to get people to understand what you're doing and its benefits and be more accepting of it. And so, well, that makes a lot of sense, right? Because then you open up another facility and hopefully you have more support. Right. It probably got easier over time because you've dealt with so many issues, so many pushbacks that I'm not saying that, you open a new one. You said you're working on 2 new buildings. I'm sure somebody's going to push back, but you've probably dealt with most of those objections, right?
Well, in the local, say Greenville, small town like ours, it can be more difficult because you become a very big fish in a small pond. But
Right.
in Dayton, they have so many major issues that they see us as a very positive influence. In fact, one of the county commissioners said that 20 years ago, when we started there were numerous other agencies like ours. Today, we're the only one left.
Really, they just
So
didn't make it.
a lot of fly-by-nights.
Right. Of course,
But
people that
that
aren't
speaks
committed to
volumes.
the cause, right?
I'm sorry?
People that aren't committed to, you know, the cause, let's call it, whatever.
Well, part of that came out with George Bush's faith-based initiative, and
Okay.
a lot of people are involved thinking they can get money
Right.
from the program, and they did for a year or 2 years,
Right.
but they didn't last beyond the money.
Right. There's always people like, even in voucher programs and charter schools, and they're doing
Right.
it to suck money out of the government. And that's not what you're there for.
And
So,
that's why we work so hard to. I ingrain in my staff that it's not about the money. It's not about abiding by the rules. It's about being accountable to a higher authority. We
of
do it
course.
because it's right.
Right. Now, this is full time for you now, right? You're able to pay your bills and live, and you don't have another job, do you?
No, this is it. In fact, I guess you can call it my other job was I spent the last 10 years writing a novel on because I wanted to share this idea of second chances in a readable format.
Yeah.
And so I
You're
might
an
spend
author.
I spent half my time with Good Samaritan Home, but I have staff that can do the day to day.
No, right. Sure.
But now I spend all my time with the publishing aspect of the book because it's doing so well that.
Has it done very well?
But yeah, we've sold give or take 6,000 copies in the first in just the past several months.
That's when it was released a couple months ago. I thought you told me, right?
December 1st, I believe, is the actual date.
So it'll be coming up on a year then.
Be a year. And the average novel, there's so many novels out there that some are quite good, but they just get buried in the publishing industry. So I formed a publishing company called Good Don Quixote Press, and I've been able to manage that because we're always tilting at the windmills.
Right.
But it's actually worked just like Good Samaritan Home. It's worked very well, but it takes a lot of work.
Yeah, to
But the
promote the
feedback-
book, and sure.
The feedback has been extremely positive. That people are identifying with the character in the book, and that's exactly what I wanted because I believe that many people, they may not be in jail, but
Right.
they need a second chance.
Yeah. Right. It's a fictional book, right? But supporting in spirit what you do, so people understand, right, from a parable standpoint or a story standpoint, what these people go through, right? I mean, it's based on some information and your experience, right?
If I were to say to you, I want to talk about the data and the financial aspects of reentry, you would glaze over.
Of course.
But if I said, here's a young boy, 12 years old, who was abused by his father and his mother and also his pastor, he ended up going through all the frustrations of the 60s. He was involved at Kent State. He felt like he was lost, living in a very tumultuous age until he met Kate. And suddenly you're seeing Titanic because you see these two young lovers. And it turns out it's gotten 23 awards.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, and most of them have been for inspirational novel.
Sure.
So I've been very pleased with the reception.
Very good. All right. Well, why don't we do this? Why don't we take a quick commercial? I got a couple of sponsors. We'll take it's a couple of minutes, and we'll stay on the camera at the time. I'll mute you, mute me, and then we can come back and talk more about, the things that are going on in the community. I'd like to know more about the really understanding the benefits to a community. You mentioned them, but yeah, I think there's more of them, and we could talk about the book too. But can we do that?
Yeah, no problem at all.
All right. Sounds good.
Here's a word from our sponsors.
Looking to market and grow your business? Or perhaps you're just getting started and want to hit the ground running? AWeber is the best choice for online email marketing and automation of your business. From maintaining a subscriber list to drip campaigns and landing pages, AWeber gives you tools and integrations that make marketing easy and fun. As our partner and sponsor, we use all their tools to promote the podcast and market our law firm. AWeber, the best alternative for online marketing. For over 30 years, the Alternative Board, or TAB, has built a thriving community of forward-thinking CEOs and business owners who want to radically improve their companies. Through unique combinations of one-on-one business coaching, participation in monthly TAB board meetings with other non-competing owners, a suite of strategic tools, and customized strategic planning workshops, TAB membership can deliver greater strength to your business and a better work-life balance for you and your family. All packaged in a streamlined and affordable service that the people at TAB invite you to try risk-free. Are you struggling with managing advertising due to a lack of time or expertise? Perhaps you're facing challenges in scaling ads for your store. Are you feeling lost when strategies have no success? GSM Growth Agency is your reliable partner in overcoming these business challenges. Feel the impact of collaborating with a team dedicated not only to short-term goals, but also to building long-term partnerships and achieving sustained success. Embark on an exciting journey to redefine the possibilities of e-commerce and create a legacy of unparalleled excellence. Take decisive action now. Follow their link in the show notes to receive a complimentary audit of your Shopify store conducted by a GSM expert. Propel your e-commerce game to new heights with GSM Growth Agency. Follow the link in the show notes to learn more about all of our sponsors. And now back to our show. All right, John. So we're back and we are talking about Good Samaritan Home. I've had a fair amount of social entrepreneurs on the show. We're doing nonprofits or whatever, but it's like you said before, a lot of them peter out. They don't just peter out because they're just trying to make money. They peter out because, it's hard to build a business like that in terms of getting support. I mean, you built a business that actually you found out had a way to get revenue to support the cost of the business and was able to grow it. But there's a lot of people that have passion for certain things. And I do. I set up nonprofits and they don't go anywhere because raising money, getting grants, doing whatever you're doing is difficult. And you don't have to do that, right? There's no grants that you have to write for, apply for, anything like that.
At one point we did that, but that's a really tough business.
Right.
And if you're lucky, it lasts 3 years and then you have to restaff and readjust.
Right.
But maybe what really helped me, at least, was our first question we started with is, what is the need in the community?
Right.
And because so many nonprofits come in and say, I'd like to do this.
Yeah.
I want to offer you,
right,
particularly faith-based, because they have this passion, but they don't know the market.
Yeah.
And
it's no
so
different
they're
than
offering
profit businesses.
People don't want.
Yeah. Right. People aren't concerned about it. It's not a big issue. It's, whatever it is, you got to do the market research, right?
That's exactly right. And so I felt initially that there was a need for a homeless shelter.
Right.
But when the Department of Correction came to me and said, we have a need. So we've been constantly adjusting according to the need from the Department of Correction.
Right. Well, that was when you had one guy living in your house, right? And you didn't own a house yet. And so the path kind of showed itself.
That's right. And now the biggest thing we had to do was we had to step out in literally acts of faith and say, I don't have the money for this, but I believe strongly enough it'll work. So let's invest in this house like my wife did with her inheritance.
Right.
She invested her money because she believed in the mission.
Right.
And we've been doing that ever since. Now, the other aspect is my building business taught me how to understand the market, the real estate market.
Yeah.
So we were buying houses when the market was very flat. And we could buy a house for $20,000-$30,000 at that time,
and put in a lot of sweat equity and do it at a much lower cost, right? And you're buying everything wholesale.
We had no cash flow, but we had a lot of. And they're the volunteers could help us with the work,
right?
So, and we're still saying, what is the need in the community?
Yeah,
and that puts it back. So I'm not saying I want to do this for you. I want to help you with your problem.
Yeah, I think that a lot of people that I meet who have a passion for some sort of a charitable endeavor or something, social based, they don't realize that it's no different than a for-profit business from the planning standpoint, right? You have to write, let's call it the business plan, right? because you have to figure out, first of all, is there a need? How I'm going to market it? How am I going to pay for this? What kind of people do I need to do this? What do the finances look like in terms of managing these facilities? And you were lucky enough to find a revenue source, but I think a lot of people don't. So then they go down that road, like you said, oh, I can get a grant and start this thing up. But, grants aren't like ongoing cash flow. It doesn't work that way. You have to apply for new ones every year or every couple of years or whatever. And so you're always back to, dealing with that stuff. And it's a challenge. And then some people, they don't have any staying power. So I think that,
Right.
really want to do something, even if it's faith-based, you have to do the work up front to know, how can I make this work?
Now, the question came up yesterday in our board meeting of how stable is our contract or our relationship? Is there still an ongoing need? And the answer is yes, but someday that could change. So
Yeah.
what I did was about 12 years ago, I started an extension program on my own that was housing post program. So
Okay.
if somebody was with us, they're living for free for a year and they get a job and they apply to get their own apartment, but nobody will rent to them.
Okay.
So they're back in the same problem, and it's not their fault. So what we did was we started getting separate houses that were set up as a boarding house where 2 and 3 fellows could share a house, and they would live in that house as a renter as an ongoing part of our program. And what we developed was an extra leg to the stool in case this leg broke.
Right.
This would support us. So worst comes to worst, we could convert all our houses into not rentals, but renting program.
Low income housing, basically.
Yeah, low income housing. That's exactly right.
Right.
So it would still provide the same type of work, but it could be independent if the contract failed.
Right, because your risk is the prisons changed their system and they said, sorry, John, we can't pay you anymore to put these guys in, maybe it's a political thing. I don't know, whatever. And then that revenue dries up, right?
Yeah, it could rain someday somewhere. And so I'm always aware. So I don't like to depend on one source.
Yeah.
Because that source, realistic as a business model, it could dry up.
Of course.
So
if you have one client, that's a
Yes.
risky way to live.
That's exactly right. And that's the business part of me there.
Yeah.
And you have to think in terms of when someone says, well, God will provide. Well, God provided you with the 2 legs to start walking.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I always say that if you are in a friend of mine used to say that, a friend of my dad's, he passed away. If you're on a lake, right, in a lightning storm and you're in an aluminum boat, you can pray to God, but you better also row to shore real fast.
By the way, I did that up in New York State. I was in an aluminum boat in a lightning storm, and we did.
Row real quick. Yeah, it's true. I was on a Canadian fishing trip when I was young with my dad, and we got stuck in a lightning storm like that. And I think we had to pull over in a duck blind or something. And as I was stepping out of the boat, lightning hit the water. We were in aluminum boats, of course, and went through the boats. And I was already out of the boat. But
unbelievable.
Yeah, things you think about. But I was young. I didn't think it was any big deal. I was like 10. No idea.
And I think that what it comes down to is when you have a passion for any sort of work, it's still a business.
Of course.
You have to think like a business, but also I don't want to think as solely as a profit business.
No, but you want to think from the standpoint of you want this to continue, to be able to continue to help people. You don't have to get rich doing it. But now I was going to ask you, what was it? Oh, are the prison systems in Ohio, are they public or are they private?
Both. Okay.
So some you deal with are public and some you deal with are private.
Yes. And the thinking is that the private system is profit making and they want to keep people locked up. And I haven't found any evidence of that.
No, like you see on TV.
It's cost saving for the state.
Right. Yeah. They had, what was that woman with the woman's prison, that show Orange is the New Black, and they were converting the prisons and the companies were just bilking these things and you just haven't seen that to be the case.
I haven't seen it. The truth is that Ohio is extremely progressive in its rehabilitation programming. I've been very impressed with their approach and how they handle it. It's not at all like Shawshank.
No, I'm sure it's not. Now, do you know of colleagues who are doing this in other states or are you unique in the business?
I'm sure that there are others, but
Yeah.
I don't know of them.
No. You
So
think
we
you
were
could? It would
fortunate.
be hard to do outside of Ohio, though, in your case, right? As far
Yeah,
as you know.
because the funding is in Ohio, the contracts in Ohio,
Right.
and to my knowledge, I don't. There may be others, but I'm not aware of any that are at least as well developed as this one. So I
Right.
give
So
a lot of credit to the people that in Columbus that I work with.
yeah, I lived in Columbus for a couple of years. I lived in Columbus, Ohio. Yeah.
Ohio State.
I didn't go to Ohio State, but we lived near the university. I worked for one of the big insurance company, Nationwide,
Oh yeah,
for
yeah.
about 2-3 years. We lived there.
Yeah, I spent 3 months sleeping at Ohio State. Then I realized you have to go to class.
Yeah, that's can affect your ability to keep staying there.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah, that's so funny. That's so funny. Yeah, so if you wanted to like open up homes in Indiana, you'd have to approach prisons first and say, "Do you have this need? Will you pay for this?" Right, and the whole thing. But there's no reason to do that.
And ironically, we're on the border with Indiana, and so
Yeah.
if somebody from Indiana calls us, we can't help them.
Has that happened?
Yes,
It has.
it's
Yeah.
unfortunate, but we can't. Legally, we can't.
Right. Oh, because your contracts are with Ohio. So they see
That's right.
your ad, or not an ad, but they do some research and they find your organization.
I sometimes I'll get calls from Leavenworth Prison. Somebody will say, "I'm being released. I'm looking
Yeah.
for a home," and they're looking for a parole option, and I can't help them.
Right. And you have nowhere to refer them?
No, I really don't.
Yeah.
That's one of the drawbacks. You can't save the world. And the
Right.
best you can do is you take care of your corner, and if you keep that corner clean, then you've done your day's work.
Well, you know what I always felt like you're only really called upon to do your share, right? If everybody just did their share, the world would be a better place. You know, you don't have to pull more than your own weight, because at the end of the day, you may burn out anyway, and you're not helping the people that you're trying to help to begin with.
Yeah, I think there are too many of us try to be captains in the Army, and my job is just to be a soldier. And
Yeah.
just point me in the right direction and tell me what to do, and I'll do it.
Right, absolutely. So, all right. So, what's the future hold for the organization? You said you're looking at, or maybe in contract, to purchase 2 more buildings.
Yeah, if we do that, that'll add upwards of 10 to 20 more bed options for us.
Okay.
And that's simply because we're at capacity right now, and we always like to have room for the emergency call.
Right. Of course.
And that'll also allow us to have more long-term housing, so we can offer stable housing after our program.
Yeah. Very good. So, what's the turnaround time with that? You close on the building; it's still another year or 2 to get it in shape. Well, no, now you're not doing this part time, but
Well, it can be. The last building we bought took us about a year because it needed so much work.
right.
And I don't like to do that. So I'm willing to pay a little bit more now to save spend
Get
a little
money
wallet
bit
so I can
better
save
shape.
my
Yeah.
back.
Right. Right. So, do you go, because I'm a real estate guy, do you go into contract with the contingency that this building will be approved by the town for this particular use? Because if you buy the property and then you can't get approval from the town, then you got to sue the town. You got to go down that whole road. Is it usually contingent on that, or no?
No, I try to buy something that's within zoning,
Okay.
meet all the legal requirements, so you don't have to go to the city commission and say, "Will you approve this?" You simply become a landlord in their eyes.
Got it. So you're
And-
filing your permits. You don't have to go in front of a board unless
That's
somebody hears about it, or there's a local news article and somebody goes to the town and files a complaint that you got to deal with. You're willing to take that risk.
Yeah, ever since our first bout with the law, I work very hard to be a good neighbor and to avoid those issues.
Yeah.
I don't want to stick my finger in your eye on purpose.
Right. No,
Nobody wins.
It's a marketing strategy, right? It's a business development strategy. You gotta think about those things.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. There are too many people who go in with the blind optimism, like I did initially, thinking that the newspaper article would be beneficial, and ended up with police protection instead.
Yeah. Really? It got to be that bad?
That bad. Yeah, I had somebody stab me.
Oh, so you got to kind of keep your head down now.
Well,
Just,
then
why make a big stink about it, right? You got
what made it worse was after that happened, I had somebody write to the newspaper and say they were willing to put up bail so the guy could finish the job.
oh God.
But that was unusual.
Well, I'm glad you could laugh at it now, but I'm sure at the time it was not. It was unsettling.
What surprised me was how quickly things can happen.
Yeah, Sure.
You like to think that you could anticipate and defend yourself, but when you're dealing, and we're seeing this again, when you're dealing with mob mentality,
Yeah.
there's emotions that you think you're ready, but you're never ready. So, but now what I've learned to do is I'm always looking around the room.
Of course. Well, I mean, the purpose of the article was to raise goodwill so people would understand the good things that you're doing for the community. It wasn't to find new customers, right? Those are coming from the prison. You don't need an article. You don't need to publicize for that. And it backfired on you where people said, they went nuts. And I guess in hindsight, it's not surprising, but
Well, when you deal with misinformation, emotional information,
right.
The end result is exactly what we're seeing today.
Oh, yeah.
But social media just magnifies it.
Right, exactly, because you can lie and the social media makes it look like it's real. And then there's somebody else that chimes in. And, conspiracy theories are great, by the way, because you can't disprove a conspiracy theory. You're going to say, well, that's not true because of this. But that information is being provided by the conspirators. So you can always, right? You can always push it to the side and make up more things. It's just unbelievable, the stuff. But you're right. Social media and the flow of information and the speed in which things change hands and people's ability to post things on their own, which they couldn't do in the past. You used to have to come from legitimate, right, outlets, has just made it really difficult. But it sounds like your journey has so far worked out. Like, you've been able to grow. I'm sure you've had bumps along the way. Did you ever have a house that you had to close because of problems with the community or whatever?
The city threatened us early on, and that's when we went to court, and we were able to win. And now I joke about it. I say that people wave at us with all their fingers. So
right. It's better than just the one, right?
Yeah. For the longest time, I thought they were trying to give me directions. So
yeah, right. That's very funny. So you've been able to hold on to every property you've acquired, though.
Yes.
In terms of that, okay. Anything we should know about what the future holds? I mean, first of all, if people want to learn about you and learn about your story, first of all, let's talk about the book. What's the name of the book and where they can find it? We'll put a link in the show notes.
The book is called Running as Fast as I Can. And what it means is that there are some of us who start off behind in the race because of poverty or abuse or just birth.
Yeah.
And we feel like we can't catch up to someone who appears to be normal.
Right.
They grew up in a home with education. They grew up with culture, or they grew up with two parents.
Right. Support. Yeah.
Yeah. I rarely see two parents in any of our resident homes now.
They don't have. Yeah. Yeah.
And what happened with the book was it's fiction, although it comes out of a lot of my own experiences, but it's definitely not about me.
Yeah.
It's about people that I've met that are incorporated. And it's much like a Forrest Gump type of story where you go through history and you see this character grow or come of age. And in the end, when you think things are going well, there's always life has a way of getting in the way. And so he has to deal with all these normal life tragedies.
Right.
And that's why it's gotten so many awards, because the idea is that people feel the story.
Sure. So it's available
on Amazon too.
Amazon, hardcover, softcover, ebook.
Ebook and the Audible just came out last week.
There is Audible? Oh, I love Audible. I listen in the car. Okay, I'm definitely going to download the book then. Support you, and I want to listen to it. So we'll put the links in the show notes about the home and everything that you're doing. And what's a good way to connect with you? Are you on LinkedIn or you want, whatever?
If you go to johndavidgraham.com.
Okay, very good.
That's my author website, and it'll link you to all those others. I'm on Facebook. I'm on TikTok and Instagram. I've learned how to speak the language of my granddaughters.
Yeah, it gets away from you real quick. My kids are even texting things. I'm like, what does that mean? LMK, let me know. I'm like, oh, okay. Like, it's not a world we grew up in. It was just very, very different.
The sad part is that I spent 10 years writing a book and learning how to use every word intentionally. And I hired an editor for 2 years, and we worked and worked and worked to put all this emotion into it. We get on social media, and in three initials, the whole chapter is summarized.
Right, exactly.
I
That's
say,
pretty funny.
I paid $2,000 for an editor. What are you doing?
Exactly. That's very funny. Well, John, I can't thank you enough for coming on and sharing your story. And if people are listening and watching, definitely get the book. If you like to listen to it, it's now on Audible. And if you like to read, ebook or print. And let's stay in touch. I want to hear, as the organization grows and develops, and keep my connection to Ohio, which is nice.
And the only caveat is, readers, be careful. It's a tearjerker and a page turner.
Yeah, that's
so
good.
You're going to end up crying every page.
Okay, good. All right, I appreciate it. Let's go to the credits and stick around a little bit.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of The Accidental Entrepreneur. Opening and closing music written and performed by Howie Moskovich and made to order music. For information about Howie and his music services, please follow the link in our show notes. If you like the podcast, please tell others about us. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, on Amazon Music, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and most of the other podcast directories. If you like what you hear, please leave us a 5-star review and feel free to share our episodes on social media. If you have any questions or comments, ideas for the show, or you'd even like to appear as a guest, reach out to us by email at info@beinackerlaw.com.
The Accidental Entrepreneur is hosted by Mitch Beinacker and produced by Beinacker Law. If you'd like to learn more about our business and legal services, you can find us on social media or visit our website at beinackerlaw.com. Thanks for listening, and be sure to subscribe to our feed to be notified of all future episodes.